America did not fight the Second World War with tanks alone. It fought with an industrial machine, a rolling ecosystem of tanks, trucks, half-tracks, amphibious craft, and recovery vehicles that moved soldiers, ammunition, fuel, and entire armies across 2 oceans and 3 continents. Behind every famous battle was a supply line built on wheels and tracks. And behind every tank crew was a mechanic, a driver, and a convoy keeping them fed, fueled, and armed. This is the full American vehicle fleet of World War II. From the light tanks that opened the war outclassed, to the trucks that never made headlines but arguably won it. We start with armor, light tanks. M2 light tank. The M2 arrived before America had fully entered the war and served mainly as a training and development platform for the armored force still finding its footing. Early versions carried an unusual twin-turret layout that technology quickly outgrew, but the chassis and lessons learned from the M2 fed directly into the tanks that replaced it. M3 Stuart. The M3 Stuart entered service in 1941 as America's primary light tank, built for speed and reconnaissance rather than head-on fighting. Its 37mm gun and thin armor were already outdated against German medium tanks by the time it reached North Africa. British crews nicknamed it Honey for its smooth ride and mechanical reliability, and that reliability, more than firepower, kept it in frontline service years after its gun had become outdated. M5 Stuart. The M5 Stuart replaced the M3's aircraft engine with twin Cadillac car engines, a change driven by wartime engine shortages rather than tactical need. The switch gave it a quieter ride and an automatic transmission, which crews found easier to operate under stress. It fought the same underpowered battles as its predecessor, valued for scouting and flank security rather than tank-on-tank combat. M22 Locust. The M22 Locust was built small enough to fit inside a glider, designed to give airborne troops their own armored support after they landed. Its combat use stayed limited. Its light armor and small 37mm gun offered little against dedicated tank opposition, but it stood as a genuine attempt to solve a problem no other nation had fully cracked: how to drop armor from the sky. M24 Chaffee. The M24 Chaffee arrived late in 1944 and corrected what the earlier Stuarts had lacked: a genuinely effective 75mm gun paired with sloped armor and low weight. It could outrun most vehicles on the battlefield and still hit hard enough to matter. Crews who had spent years in underarmed light tanks finally had one that could compete, rather than just observe. But American armor needed more than scouts. It needed tanks that could stand in the main line of battle. Medium tanks. M3 Lee/Grant. The M3 Lee was a stopgap, designed because America needed a 75mm gun on the battlefield faster than a proper turret could be engineered. The solution was awkward. The main gun sat in a side spunson with limited traverse, while a smaller 37mm gun rode in the turret above it. It was tall, mechanically complex, and a poor silhouette to hide behind. It bought time for the British 8th Army in North Africa until something better arrived. M4 Sherman. The M4 Sherman became America's standard medium tank and the backbone of its armored divisions. Its design prioritized reliability, ease of production, and standardized parts over raw power, which let American factories build tens of thousands of them, while German factories struggled to match output. It was not the heaviest or best armed tank of the war, but its numbers, mechanical durability, and constant upgrades, better guns, thicker armor, wet ammunition storage, kept it competitive from Africa to the Rhine. Medium tanks carried the weight of the war, but against Germany's heaviest armor, America needed something bigger. Heavy tanks. M26 Pershing. The M26 Pershing was rushed into combat in the final months of the war specifically to answer German Tiger and Panther tanks that the Sherman struggled against. Its 90mm gun and thicker frontal armor finally gave American crews a tank built to trade blows rather than rely on numbers. It arrived too late to define the war, but it defined the direction American tank design would take afterward. Tanks alone couldn't solve every armored threat. When infantry needed protection from enemy tanks without matching them gun for gun, a different kind of vehicle took the field. Tank destroyers. M3 GMC. The M3 GMC was one of the earliest American attempts at mobile anti-tank firepower. Essentially a 75mm gun bolted onto a half-track chassis. It was a makeshift solution built out of urgency rather than doctrine. But it punched real holes in enemy armor during the fighting in the Philippines and North Africa before purpose-built tank destroyers replaced it. M6 GMC. The M6 GMC, nicknamed Fargo, mounted a 37mm anti-tank gun on a light truck chassis. It was nimble but offered almost no protection for its crew, and as German armor grew thicker through the war, its small gun could no longer keep pace. It was gradually pushed into training and light infantry support roles. M10 Wolverine. The M10 Wolverine paired a Sherman chassis with an open-topped turret and a 3-inch gun, built around U.S. tank destroyer doctrine that favored mobility and ambush tactics over armor. Crews disliked the open top under artillery fire, but the vehicle's speed let destroyer battalions redeploy quickly to wherever German armor broke through, and it became the most widely used American tank destroyer of the war. M18 Hellcat. The M18 Hellcat was built for one purpose: speed. Stripped of heavy armor and powered by a radial aircraft engine, it could reach roughly 50 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest tracked vehicles of the war. That speed let crews strike from ambush and reposition before return fire found them, though it left the Hellcat dangerously exposed in a stand-up fight. M36 Jackson. The M36 Jackson mounted a 90 mm gun on the same chassis family as the Wolverine, giving tank destroyer units the firepower to seriously threaten Panthers and Tigers for the first time. Its powerful gun gave American forces a much stronger answer to heavily armored German tanks, even though its armor remained thin by design. Destroying enemy armor was only half the fight. Infantry also needed guns that could follow them into open ground. Self-propelled artillery. M7 Priest. The M7 Priest put a 105 mm howitzer on a Sherman-derived chassis, giving artillery batteries the mobility to keep pace with advancing armor, instead of waiting for towed guns to reposition. Its distinctive machine gun ring mount earned it the nickname Priest from British crews, who thought it resembled a pulpit. M8 HMC, Scott. The M8 HMC placed a 75 mm pack howitzer on a Stuart light tank chassis, giving armored formations their own close-range indirect fire support. Rather than hunting tanks, it was built to blast bunkers and machine gun nests, clearing the way for infantry to advance behind it. M12 GMC. The M12 mounted a heavy 155 mm gun on a modified Sherman hull, built specifically to blast through the concrete bunkers of the Siegfried Line. It was slow to reload and limited in numbers, but where fortified positions stopped infantry cold, the M12's gun could open a path through them. M40 GMC. The M40 arrived in the final phase of the war as the successor to the M12, pairing the same long-range 155 mm long tom gun with the wider, more stable chassis of the latest Sherman variants. The upgrade gave American artillery batteries a sturdier, more capable platform for exactly the kind of long-range demolition work the M12 had pioneered. M43 HMC. The M43 swapped the M40's 155 mm gun for an 8-inch howitzer, built to level heavy fortifications outright. It reached production in the war's closing months, representing the far end of what American self-propelled artillery could deliver by 1945. M4, 105 mm assault gun. This wasn't a tank destroyer, but a bunker buster, a standard Sherman turret refitted with a 105 mm howitzer instead of the usual gun. The change gave tank platoons their own high explosive firepower for demolition work, without needing to call in separate artillery support. Artillery and armor needed eyes ahead of them. That job belonged to lighter, faster vehicles built to see the enemy first. Armored cars and scout vehicles. M3 Scout Car. The M3 Scout Car, often called the White Scout Car, served as the wheeled transport of choice for early war commanders, General Patton among them. Armored and armed with multiple machine guns, it handled reconnaissance duty before half-tracks took over the role in greater numbers. M8 Greyhound. The M8 Greyhound was a 6-wheeled armored car built for reconnaissance, fast and quiet enough to scout ahead of advancing columns and radio back what it found before engaging anything directly. Its light armor meant crews avoided direct fights, using speed and a 37 mm gun only when cornered. M20. The M20 was essentially a Greyhound without a turret, converted into an armored utility car instead. It carried commanders, hauled cargo, and moved troops through contested territory, relying on the same chassis and light armor as its armed counterpart, while trading firepower for cargo space. Reconnaissance vehicles found the enemy. Half-tracks carried the infantry who would fight them. Half-tracks. M2 Half-Track. Shorter than its better-known counterpart, the M2 was built primarily as an artillery prime mover, hauling guns and ammunition through mud that would stop a standard truck. Its shorter frame traded personnel capacity for maneuverability in that role. M3 Half-Track. The M3 became the definitive American armored personnel carrier of the war. Tracks at the rear, wheels up front, carrying squads of infantry into contact while giving them protection from shrapnel and small arms fire that open trucks couldn't offer. M5 Half-Track. Visually almost identical to the M3, the M5 was built by International Harvester specifically to expand production for Lend-Lease. It used a different engine and slightly rolled fenders, and it served extensively with British, Canadian, and Soviet forces who depended on American industry to fill their own vehicle shortages. M9 half-track. The M9 was International Harvester's version of the M2, built for the same prime mover role but produced in parallel to meet Lend-Lease demand. Together with the M5, it proved that American factories could arm entire Allied forces without slowing supply to American units. Getting infantry across land was one problem. Getting them across water and onto enemy beaches was another entirely. Amphibious vehicles. M29 Weasel. The M29 Weasel was originally developed for a proposed covert winter operation in Norway, built as a fully tracked cargo carrier that could cross deep mud, snow, and swamp terrain no wheeled vehicle could touch. That original mission never happened, but the Weasel found lasting use wherever ground conditions defeated conventional trucks. LVT-1. Alligator. The LVT-1 was the first of the landing vehicle tracked family, using paddle-like tracks to swim ashore and then keep crawling once it hit the beach. That ability to move seamlessly from open water onto land made it the vehicle that unlocked the Pacific's island-hopping campaign. LVT-2. Water Buffalo. The LVT-2 improved on the Alligator with a stronger suspension for handling hard ground once ashore. It became the workhorse of marine amphibious operations, ferrying supplies from ship to shore under fire throughout the Pacific. LVT-4. The LVT-4 moved its engine forward to make room for a large rear ramp, letting troops and even light vehicles like Jeeps drive straight off the back onto the beach instead of climbing over the sides under fire. It was a significant improvement in how quickly a landing force could actually get into the fight. LVTA-1. The LVTA-1 added the turret from an M3 Stuart light tank onto the standard amphibious hull, turning a troop and cargo carrier into a lightly armed escort that could support the first wave ashore. LVTA-4. The LVTA-4 went further, swapping in a 75mm howitzer turret to act as floating artillery, capable of hitting beach defenses at close range before troops ever touched sand. DUKW. The DUKW, pronounced duck, was a six-wheeled amphibious truck that could load supplies from a ship offshore, swim to the beach, and drive straight inland without unloading onto smaller craft. That ship-to-shore flexibility made it indispensable at Normandy and across the Pacific, where traditional docks and harbors often didn't exist or had been destroyed. Vehicles that could fight and float were vital. But the vehicle every soldier actually depended on daily was far smaller and far less glamorous. Jeeps, trucks, and prime movers. Willys MB/Ford GPW Jeep. The Jeep was small, simple, and everywhere, used for reconnaissance, message running, ambulance duty, towing light guns, and carrying officers to the front line. Its four-wheel drive and lightweight let it go places larger vehicles couldn't, and its mechanical simplicity meant it could be repaired almost anywhere with basic tools. No single vehicle in the American fleet did more different jobs. Dodge WC Series. The Dodge WC Series, sometimes called the Beep, covered everything between the Jeep and the full-size cargo trucks, command cars, weapons carriers, ambulances, and light cargo haulers built on a shared 3/4-ton chassis. Their mid-sized flexibility let units match the right truck to the right job without relying on either the smallest or the largest vehicles in the fleet. Chevrolet G506. Often overshadowed by larger trucks, the 1.5-ton Chevrolet G506 was a critical logistical link, hauling troops and towing artillery in nearly every theater of the war, including shipments to the Eastern Front through Lend-Lease, where Soviet forces relied on it heavily. GMC CCKW. The GMC CCKW, nicknamed the Deuce and a half for its 2.5-ton capacity, formed the backbone of American logistics in Europe. Its six-wheel drive gave it the traction to keep moving on roads that ordinary trucks abandoned, and with over 500,000 built, it supplied the famous Red Ball Express convoys that kept Patton's advancing armies fueled after the breakout from Normandy. M4 high-speed tractor. When artillery grew too heavy for trucks to tow, the M4 high-speed tractor took over. A fully tracked prime mover, it hauled heavy anti-aircraft and field guns through terrain that would have stopped a wheeled vehicle outright. Diamond T 980-981sts. The Diamond T heavy tractor was built to haul what nothing else could: disabled tanks, artillery pieces, and oversized cargo, using a low-slung ballast body that gave it enough traction to move loads many times its own weight. Paired with a tank transporter trailer, it moved armor to where it was needed without wearing out the tank's own tracks. Trucks kept the army supplied. But when a tank was hit or broke down on the battlefield itself, Recovery required a vehicle built specifically for the job. Recovery vehicles. M32 Tank Recovery Vehicle. The M32 was a Sherman hull stripped of its turret and fitted with a winch, crane, and A-frame boom, built to haul damaged tanks out of active combat zones under fire. Recovery crews worked some of the most exposed jobs of the war, and the M32's armor, inherited from the tank it was based on, gave them at least some protection while doing it. M1 Heavy Wrecker. The M1 Heavy Wrecker was built around a heavy-duty crane and winch system, used to lift engines, right overturned vehicles, and clear stalled traffic from convoy routes. It rarely saw combat itself, but a blocked road could stall an advance just as effectively as enemy fire, and the M1 was what kept the columns moving. Motorcycles. Harley-Davidson WLA. The Harley-Davidson WLA, sometimes called the Liberator, was modified for military use with scabbards for submachine guns and blackout lights. It served as a courier and reconnaissance vehicle early in the war, prized for its speed on open roads, though rougher terrain and more versatile vehicles like the Jeep gradually pushed motorcycles into rear area courier and escort duties. Indian 741. The Indian 741 stayed in the Harley's shadow but filled a similar role on a smaller, lighter frame. Thousands were built, with a large share sent to British and Commonwealth forces through Lend-Lease to keep communication lines open between units. Staff and liaison vehicles. Ford Staff Car. Based on the standard civilian sedan, the Ford Staff Car gave high-ranking officers a comfortable, unarmored way to move between headquarters, painted in drab olive to blend into the rest of the war's machinery. Chevrolet Staff Car. The Chevrolet Staff Car was a militarized version of the civilian Master Deluxe, serving as Ford's rival in the same role, ferrying generals and other high-ranking officers across secure areas well behind the front. Cruising. No single American vehicle won the Second World War. The Sherman is remembered because it was everywhere, but it moved on fuel hauled by the CCKW, followed infantry carried in half-tracks, and came home from the battlefield behind a Diamond T or an M32 when it broke down. The Jeep carried messages that kept commanders informed. The DUKW and the LVT family put soldiers on beaches that had no harbors. None of it worked in isolation. American victory depended not on one famous machine, but on the enormous system of vehicles, factories, mechanics, drivers, and crews that kept the armies moving, from the assembly line to the front line and back again.